Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our emergency pod. I am your host, Sean McIntosh, joined by my co-host, Caleb Adams, to chat a little bit about our incoming new manager. It has been reported, according to a number of sources, but I'll name Il Messaggero claims that Marco Baroni has agreed to sign a 2-year contract with Lazio, a potential third-year option, all worth around 1.3 million euros a season. We are recording this prior to an official announcement by Lazio. However, Verona has officially announced in a press release that the club and Baroni have mutually agreed to terminate his contract, which essentially opens the doors for him to put pen to paper on his deal with Lazio. Claudio Lotito already making his rounds, doing the press tours, and speaking about Baroni. And so it is all but official. Marco Baroni, your new Lazio manager. Before we dive into specifics, you tell me, Caleb, what's your instant reaction? What's your gut telling you about this?
Oh man, my gut, I will say my initial gut feeling was repulsion. I was like, "What? Man." Even okay, I understand. I didn't necessarily expect another signing, but even Tudor, despite like being 1 year stints, he coached Marseille. Like that isn't a joke of a club. I mean, that's a lot of pressure at that club. So even him had a little bit more of a resume than someone like Baroni that I think many would consider either a City B sort of specialist or a relegation specialist, right? Kind of in those kind of that period, that space. Um, and so that was my initial gut reaction, was like, I cannot believe this. This is just a cheap cop out. Someone that Lotito can control, someone that will be a yes man. But I've had about really, I guess, nearly a week. It's been kind of reported for a while now, to think about it, and my stance has changed a little bit, but we can go into that later.
Well, our friend Erfan, a fellow Laziale here in Charlotte, North Carolina, says on YouTube, Lazio will fight for 8th to 10th position next season. Not very high on Marco Baroni. So let's talk about his credentials and who he is. Who is Marco Baroni? Baroni, an Italian, 60 years of age. This is his first real crack at a upper echelon club, a club with European expectations. He has yet to manage a side playing in Europe, despite being a manager since 2000. To his credit, he's got a couple notches in his belt, a couple of accomplishments. Now we can talk about how it'll translate or not, but led Benevento to their first promotion to Serie A in 2016-2017. However, he was pretty immediately fired midway through his first Serie A stint at Benevento, then hired by Frosinone shortly after, relegated to Serie B. So not a great start. Sacked from Serie B side Cremonese. In 2020, he was appointed at newly promoted Regina and kept them afloat in Serie B. Then joined a Lecce side who was in B at the time and had some ambition, you could say, for a side in Serie B of getting out, a roster certainly capable of it. And he did lead them to Serie A, another notch in his belt. Stayed only one season in Serie A, had some contract disputes, and then and bounced to Hellas Verona, where he spent one season, seeing a little bit of a trend. We talk about Tudor's inability to stay at clubs. Now, I'll say That's unfortunately also a little bit of the world that we live in, the coaching carousel of today's football. But not a great sign. I will say though, from Hellas Verona, he did manage to avoid relegation. They finished this past season in 13th at the table, which you can scoff at, but it was a side void of a ton of talent. Some of their more talented technical players being sold off in the winter market and left with very little. We both you and I kept an eye on them, maybe a little bit more closely than others, simply because of Karol Swiderski, Charlotte FC's DP striker, being on loan to Hellas. But all that to say, pretty uninspiring of a coaching credential and resume. So, Caleb, why the hell should I be excited? Because I know maybe you've changed your tune a little bit, and look, we'll go on record to say I'm going to support any manager. Like we just want results. I don't care who's at the helm. I don't care if it's a sexy name. I don't care if it's a first year manager. None of us, we shouldn't care. And I also understand that until you get that opportunity, it's hard to judge a character. We could have talked about Simone Inzaghi, right, only being a Primavera manager and getting such an opportunity, and it worked out. So, but again, this is a guy. He's not a spring chicken. Like there's, I don't know, but Sadi also wasn't very young when he started his coaching journey. But why should I have any sort of hope? What is there in this appointment that maybe I'm missing that you feel like is not the end of the world?
I think excited about is not the word I would use. I wouldn't say that anyone should be particularly excited about disappointment for Baroni. But I do think that there are some things we can salvage of maybe a longer term vision that we didn't really see with Tudor. And that begs the question, why even sign and hire Tudor in the first place if he's not considered a project coach? So we complained about that. We complained about having a profile like him that has constantly demanded players to fit his style and then left after a year. We all questioned the move, but he got results. And so then Lotito was like, we kind of have to keep this guy around because he's getting the results. And so that leads me back to Baroni, which is now we have an opposite sort of profile in a way, which is someone that is willing to hang around, someone that's willing to even though he hasn't had huge stints being in those relegation sides, Hellas Verona was simply a contract dispute. It wasn't that Hellas Verona didn't want him anymore. It was simply he didn't get extended again because of a contract dispute. That's it. It wasn't because he wasn't putting up performance.
You mean at Lecce?
Is that what it was?
Lecce, yes. Yeah, it was Lecce.
Lecce.
Hellas, they mutually agreed, obviously, for this opportunity at Lazio, and Lazio and Hellas Verona have always had a pretty positive relationship. So, but yeah, at Lecce he left because of a contract.
Thank you for the So, and he had a pretty good stint going on there. And so for me, I think the first sort of, and really, I think the biggest pro, because I think it's good to look at pros and cons. And the biggest pro of this move is that someone that tries to maximize the squad that he has. We had someone in Tudor before who was trying to replace many of the tools that we had. But I think all of us can agree that we believed in the squad that we have. We believed in some of the signings that we made. Rovella, Guendouzi, all examples of this. And Baroni is going to try his best to make them work. And the cool thing about him is that in this situation is that they were signed with a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 in mind, right? Baroni plays that setup. So Sadi's initial sort of profiles for this sort of setup in this system should work just as good with Baroni, except Baroni has a little more flexibility in his tactics. And I do think, and I said in the tweet today, that I think Baroni is getting sort of a bad rep for being sort of this defense, like an English regulation specialist, right? A coach that's just lopping it over the top. His teams, believe it or not, really do try and keep possession. They try and build up. They're not just these one-trick pony teams where they're just launching it up top. They can play, and I think we played against them. They gave us a hard time this season in some instances, and so I think it's more so been a product of the level of coaches that he's coaching at. The quality of players are just not there, and also the budget and stuff at those levels. And so I think that's a big pro. The question for me here is, how is he as a man manager? How is he as someone getting respect in the locker room? That for me is the biggest question mark, because Sadi was great tactically, but he just couldn't inspire the guys. There was a point where he just could not get the team going, could not get the team fighting. Tudor came in, was able to ignite a fire to them. But that's the biggest question for me is, can Baroni get the respect and the buy-in from the players? If he can, maybe we can do something.
Yeah, I think a couple of my big questions that, I'd probably notch in the cons column until proven otherwise are, what you mentioned, respect, and Lazio the market is never easy for them, and now we're talking about going out and recruiting players for a project, and what type of respect, not only with the guys that are currently in his locker room, but abroad, and folks that we're targeting. Like, how do we recruit talent? Are people excited to come on board to play for Marco Baroni without any real credentials? I think that's a question. That's one notch in the cons column. Like, anything to make it any harder for players to be attracted to coming to Lazio it's tough to swallow. I think that maybe one of the pros is that look, it's a con, but it could be a pro. One of the cons is that Lotito is not going to be pushed from his market strategy, what he and who he wants to sign. I think Baroni comes in and he's just a manager. And I think that's what Lotito wants. And he wants somebody that's going to come in and, as you said, maximize what he has. Here's what you've got. Don't make a fuss about it. Go out there and manage. Pros and cons to that. One, we know that we've had some strife in the locker room and a lot of egos, and anything we can do this offseason to eliminate that, whether it's the players moving on, again, Sadi moving on, Tudor moving on. Maybe it is time to have somebody that'll just fall in line. I don't know if that's good or bad, but given kind of the roller coaster that we've had, it is kind of nice to think about a time where maybe everybody just does their jobs and focuses on that. Will bring a level of peace, and maybe we can get some results in that way. Again, I go back, and my concern is the ambition. Is he going to push for more? I mean, if Sadi couldn't get a signing out of Lotito in the winter when we so desperately needed one, will Baroni ever command something like that? I think one of the pros, and I said it from the pretty early on when I started seeing Rovella not getting playing time, and Guendouzi already kind of starting to get a sense of frustration with him and Tudor, that anything that was going to impact some of these signings staying here long term, I wanted to make sure that we moved in a direction that wouldn't hurt us. And so I think tactically, Baroni makes sense. It's not as drastic. We get to hold on to some of these players. I think at least from what I saw, most of his formations, again, it's always going to be a back four. 4-2-3-1 is what I saw more often than not. Sometimes he threw out a 4-4-2. I think he probably placed a couple players closer to that lone striker, which is nice. But his time at Lecce was known for a pretty tight defensive scheme. You said it. I don't know if it was just because of the players. It was a pretty compact mid block. There's some things that I think Lazio can do pretty well, with some of those tactics, but they were mostly passive. Like, they sat back. They did not command possession of the ball. From what I saw, particularly at Lecce, was forcing opponents wide, and they gave up. For a side like Lecce, they didn't give up a ton of goals, and it was very defensive. Now his sides weren't scoring a ton, but I do think that given some of that scheme, players like Guendouzi, players like Rovella fit in really nicely.
Let me
I
ask you
do. Go
here
ahead.
quick. I think the Lecce particularly, he helped them get promoted. And so you're thinking this is a recently promoted side, limited funds still. I think that definitely played a role there. And I want to say something to what you said earlier that I think should make all fans excited and happy, particularly you, Shawn, me as well. I mean, straight up. And it's that he plays pretty much, and it doesn't matter what formation he runs, there is one role that is always present, and that's a regista. That is such a key role in his systems. And for us, that means Rovella is the natural person there. That's where he was at there, Rosati. And I think that part of Lotito's thinking is, we invested in these players. Again, how can we maximize them? Not only can we maximize, not only do you have an individual who has that approach in general, but also has a system that requires a really good regista, requires good box-to-box midfielders, because from what I watched 3 games of his from Hellas Verona, and I did notice quite a bit of movement between like the attackers and the midfielders. So there's a bit of fluidity there.
Yeah, the attackers, I saw a lot of no different than Sadi in that they would pressure.
Similar,
They would pressure. They would need to pressure, which for now, we talked about where I rated Tati. Tati's better. Maybe obviously younger legs can run and put some pressure. I worry about that. How much is demanded from your lone striker with Ciro Immobile at this age, and that's great for a younger Ciro and suits to him. But right now, I don't want Ciro having to put so much pressure, on the center backs. But there's also a lot of and it's the timeliness, obviously, of losing a Felipe Anderson. The wingers in his system have very defensive roles. Like there is a requirement for them to track back. Now we are in a situation where we don't have Felipe Anderson, our number one guy when it comes to playing both sides of the ball. Isaacson still very young, and one of the areas that he was lacking, I think it will put a little bit of pressure now on the market to even more so get a striker and probably a couple wingers.
Yeah. And I also want to add, I think one con that I saw that I don't really think is relevant to us is, we talked about it before, bringing someone like Allegri could maybe bring in some bigger names. But all the players that we have been linked to have been relatively newcomers within Serie A that don't really require, just upgrading to Lazio would be enough to make that move for them, and wouldn't require a coach to sort of pitch him. Yes, maybe a different coach, right, could get a bigger name, a bigger profile, but we know we're limited in funds. We're not going to be spending crazy money. So I don't really think it makes that big of a difference recruitment wise. I think we'll be approaching the same profiles we have in the past. And I don't think necessarily I think, Guendouzi, Sadi was able to bring the names of like, Rovella, Guendouzi. But like I said, I just don't think that is as impactful as maybe some fans think of the recruitment side. Especially, I think, who's the player we're linked to with Hellas Verona recently? Regardless, I forgot his name. He was a winger for them. Regardless, if he likes Baroni, has a good relationship, should help kind of move that over the line, right? And so I just also want to address that I don't really think this has a big of an impact on recruitment as we think it will. And that's like that's like my thoughts. And yeah, recruitment is going to be big. That's the big thing, right? For me is we're losing potentially a lot of players, changing guard. It could make the process smooth with Lotito. Boom, 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 get deals done. Maybe get players in earlier. I saw a tweet earlier today that made a point is, what was the reason that we were delayed in bringing him some players, because Sadi was super picky about his profiles and there was some disruption there, or with Lotito now, with someone that's kind of just falling in line, doesn't really require specific signings. Will those transfers now come in, this month, beginning of July instead of in August, right? That could be potential pro as well. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly not an exciting hire, but the expectations are not too high, and so maybe we can be surprised.
I mean, so assuming way too early, but like how you mentioned expectations, how does
Yeah.
this change your expectations going into next season?
I think this is good because I do think some fans have unrealistic expectations right now. I believe finishing top six, finishing six would be pretty great for us in this particular transition uh, that we're going through right now because we are very much transitioning from a different era. The Cheeto, Luis Alberto, Milinkovic-Savic era is coming to a close. I mean, one of them's gone. Alberto's on his way out, and Cheeto is only getting older. So we are very much in sort of a rebuild mode right now, and I think the expectations of us, reaching top four, of us doing these big things in Europe, are a bit ill placed right now. Could we do that in maybe another year with the same core group? Could we find the question is, can we find that same sort of core players to help push us and have another era like that of the prime Cheeto, Alberto, and Milinkovic-Savic? Maybe this is that group. But we're at just the initial stage of this rebuild. And for me, that's why my expectations are a bit honed down because this is a rebuild. And getting top six would be amazing, but I'm afraid that we might be fighting more within that 7-8 range. What do you like?
I mean, look, I think I had this I don't know, not a debate. I was answering somebody's question on social about what our goals should be next season, and my statement was that our goal should always be Champions League qualification. That should always be our goal, regardless of who the manager is. We should always be setting our sights on that. The players that we bring in should always be players that are going to get us there. Now, you can always be at different stages of a project, but regardless of that stage in the project, like, we've got to be signing players that meet some level of expectations, and we can fall short of that. And I think our basement is always Europe. It's always some form of European play. I'd like that basement to be Europa, but I think we should always be pushing to qualify for Champions League, regardless. Now, this is. I don't want to say this is the start of a new project, just because a new manager doesn't equal new project. But it is an end of an era of sorts, with Luis Alberto. Looks like he is on his way out to the Middle East, and obviously Cheeto is at a different stage. So our big three is almost all but gone. So we do need to sign playmakers and difference makers in key roles. But I don't. It's an interesting place that we're in. I'd hope that this past season gave guys the experience needed. But I'll ask you. So, give me two players on the current squad. One, who does this benefit most, and who does this benefit least?
Ooh, that's interesting. Benefit most, Rovella.
Okay.
I think my super early take for the season is that he will be the biggest benefactor of it, and will be a key player for Baroni. And I think Baroni will take to a personal liking of him, and he will really kind of hopefully a next level next season. I think he will be, as expected, a regular, even more so than Sadi, because even under Sadi, it sometimes was mixed up between him and Cataldi. But I think he will take that next step to really be the key player for Baroni. Biggest loser, man. Honestly, with how many players are potentially leaving, I don't even know we have enough players to say there's going to be a loser, because this is going to be the starting 11. You know what I'm saying? I would say anyone that was benefiting from a 3-back, which one of the center, maybe I don't even know, maybe I don't even know, maybe a Lazzari, because he can't play wing back anymore. I don't know. I'm really not sure. I think one of this, if Romagnoli, Gila, Casale all stay, biggest loser would be Casale, because there's just no spot for him in a back four right now. So I'm going to go with that, a center back.
Okay.
Because we lose one. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely I agree with the winner being, Rovella or Guendouzi. Obviously, Guendouzi too was not going to work with Tudor. My hope is that there's still a place for him. Rumors again of Premier League teams knocking on the door and trying to solicit his services, but we've got to keep him. I just knowing how. I mean, again, you could categorize Isaacson in the winner or loser category. I think there's a place for him now positionally, but no different than Sadi. He's going to have to pick up his defensive duties, but obviously with Felipe Anderson gone, there's a need. So I do have a level of optimism. I mean, there's no other. You kind of have to be. It is what it is at this point. No, I don't think the sky is falling. I am disappointed. I think for me, the names that were out there, particularly Conceição, like that's the one that makes this really disappointing. And I think that's probably going to be the sentiment for most Laziali. Just you saw a name there, timing wise, it worked, and that's what makes it really tough to stomach. But a lot of this can change with what happens on the market and bringing some players in, and again, everybody just focusing on their roles. It's tough, but I'd say pretty neutral. I kind of go into it 5 out of 10, like not inspiring. I just question why he hasn't had, you see sprinklings of positivity or comments like that folks want to use, whether it's, Sadi has spoken really highly of him, or, these folks rate him. But then I go back to the reality. Why hasn't he gotten a job? If folks rate him, why hasn't he gotten a job?
I would say sometimes I think what he has going against him is that he didn't really start at a first team level at this level really till maybe 8-9 years ago. And unfortunately for some coaches, they just sort of get this rep of being like relegation, sort of that between relegation promotion side coach. They get kind of stuck there. Someone has to take a shot on them. And maybe he's just a result of that. Maybe he's a victim of it. Maybe it's because of something in his game, maybe it's his personality. I don't know. A lot of question marks. That's why it's difficult for me to really say, man, it's going to be a complete disaster. I have no idea, really. I really don't know what to expect. None of us do, because he's never been in the situation. There's nothing to play off of, right? To get a gauge. So we're the guinea pig for him, And
well, that's what we are. We are, we are the guinea pigs here. We're the first club to give him a chance at this stage. We're going to be playing in Europa, so it's his first taste of European play. There's going to be a level of adjustments for him, adjusting with a schedule of inflated matches and travel, and managing and juggling on 3 fronts with Europa, Coppa Italia, Serie A, all things that he hasn't really had to do before. So we'll see. Anything that you want to throw in there before we close out?
No, results over everything. That's it for me. Like I'm tired of people saying, "Oh, whatever." We need results, and if he brings the results, we're all gonna love him.
And whoever's at the helm, regardless of it being club legends like Klose, Conceição, Nesta, or complete unknowns middling in Serie B and earning promotions into the top flight or being relegated, it is always one thing. Sempre. Forza.